Hi, I'm Sue Francisco. I'm here in the Mule Barn at the lock tender's house at Freemansburg, Block 44 on the Lehigh Canal. You have probably seen the film about the house itself. But right across the canal was a barn. And this is a reconstruction of that barn. And it is actually made by traditional methods. It's held together with wooden pegs instead of nails. The construction of the barn is just as you would have seen it in 1850. Now the Mule Barn is here because the lock tender often made money if he had a barn. The canal boats had to stop somewhere for the night, and the mules had to rest and be fed. And so there might be 20 mules in here overnight. What we're going to show you today is how the mules were harnessed up. This is something the children of your age would have to do. By the time you were 7 or 8 years old, you were a mule driver, like Daniel in the picture here. And you can see that Daniel is in charge of 2 very large mules, and they're standing quietly and they're obeying him. And that is what children did. They were just as familiar with mules as you are with your dog or your cat. Now at 4 o'clock in the morning, the boats have to start. So that means if you're the mule driver, you start at 3 o'clock in the morning getting the mules ready. You have to feed them. You have to harness them up, hook the team together, and get them out to the boat, and your dad wants to go at 4 a.m. So very often what you did, and this might be a little bit of fun in your busy life, you didn't want to sleep on the boat. If you had a nice hayloft to sleep in the hay, you would rather just sleep in the barn. It's a lot warmer because there's 20 mules in here making heat. Then when you woke up in the morning, you were ready to do your job at 3 o'clock. You ran across the catwalk in the front here, you threw the hay down to the mules, then you came down yourself and you started grooming them, which meant that you had to brush and comb their fur, you had to clean out their feet, you had to wash their face, make sure their nostrils and eyes are clear of any kind of stuff that might be in them, and you might even have to wash them off if they were muddy. But then when they're clean and ready to go, you put on their harness. So here's your job at 3 a.m., right? You get the mule, you have fed him, you've brushed him, he's cleaned up, he's ready to put his harness on. And probably the first thing you want to put on is his bridle. This is called his bridle, it's on his head. There's a piece of it called the bit that actually goes in his mouth so you can guide him. There's a rein, a strap here, and if you pull this way, he knows his head will go that way and he knows to go that way and the other way. So this is how you steer the mule. Because he's such a big animal, you really just can't push him around. You have to steer his head, and then the rest of the animal follows. This is called a collar, believe it or not. And I often say that if you are a football player, you understand what this does, because it's like a shoulder pad. This allows the mules to pull with their shoulders without being hurt. It's the very shape of their body. Then, the rest of the harness is attached to these 2 things that look like skis, and they're called hames. And there's a groove in the collar where the hames fit on each side, and then you buckle them together. And this is how the harness is very strong, but it doesn't hurt the mule. You've got to have these metal and wooden pieces, because remember, that canal boat weighs quite a bit. It hauls 100 tons of coal, and it weighs about 40 tons itself, and 2 mules pull it. And you don't want them to get sore shoulders, so you want to protect their shoulders. So how does a team of mules pull a canal boat? It's a unique type of harness. First of all, we have something at the back of each mule's harness, and that's there to spread the 2 sides of the harness apart, because you can't just put a little on here and it'll pinch his behind, because it'll squeeze together. So you have to keep the 2 sides of the harness apart while he's pulling. And also we have to have a way to attach the mules together. And mules pulling a canal boat work in line. It's called working in tandem. And the hitch is called a tandem hitch. So the mule, who is the lead mule, works in the front. He has something at the back of his harness called a singletree. The singletree is just a pole of wood. It's kind of like a baseball bat, probably made out of the same hard kind of wood a baseball bat is made out of. On the ends, you can see these metal pieces. They're called pigtails. you can see that they curl like a pig's tail. That's very important, and I'll show you why when I put them together. So what happens here is the mule, I put this on the back of his harness, and now they're spread apart so that when he pulls, it's not pinching his behind. Now I'm going to harness mule number 2. Mule number 2 in the hitch is called the trace mule. And he works in the traces which connect him to his partner. But first we have to put on the rest of the harness. Now here's where people got to know each other on the canal. Why do you think they sent 10-year-old children out to harness mules? Isn't that a big job? Aren't you small? How are you going to get all that harness up on a big mule? You're not probably going to do it by yourself. You're going to need friends. So if there's 20 mules in here and everybody has 2 mules, you've got 10 kids. And if you don't help each other, nobody's father is ready by 4 o'clock. So this little system, which your father thinks up, is a life lesson for you. You have to learn how to make friends and help each other. People on this canal helped each other all the time. And this is where you started to learn to do that. Some other parts of the harness. What you have here is the belly band. So what you do when you want the belly band and you're on this side, you go sideways with your arm and you don't put your head underneath the mule. You get the other buckle and you notice that the belly band is not tight. I got it on the tightest hole and it's still loose. That's on purpose. Believe it or not, when the mule starts working, his lungs expand and he uses up all this room. So you can't start out with it tight or it will be hurting him. Again, the whole idea of a harness is to keep the mule comfortable. Now here's the fun part. This strap here is called the crupper. It goes around the mule's tail and buckles. Now this is just to keep the harness from sliding off his back because it will pull sideways. Since the mules don't pull straight forward, they have to be on the side of the canal, on the tow path. They're not directly in front of what they're pulling. So the harness is going to go like this and that, especially on the one in the back, the trace mule. All right, now, how are we going to hook the team to the boat? The trace mule wears a heavy bar called the tow bar. And you know, just like a tow truck, he's got a hook. And again, you're going to put that at the back of his harness. And the tow line that goes to the boat goes over this hook and he can pull. But wait a minute, he's the only one pulling now, right? What about his buddy in the front? He's got to share the work, okay? So remember, he was called the trace mule, right? He works between the traces. So what we have are big straps called traces, and they go from one mule to the other. Here they are. And so the pigtails on the single tree are just for this, so that you can hook these hooks into the pigtails, and then so that the pull goes all the way from the mule's collar through his traces at the side, through these traces, and now we want both mules to share the work, right? So to make the pull go straight back from his collar through his trace, through this trace, back to his trace, we actually hook this onto the side of the trace mule. Now they can share the work equally. Me just do his on the other side. And this is how they work together. Now you would take the mule team out and hook him up to the boat. And that's what happens in the morning at 3 o'clock. And if you're the lock tender's children, you're probably helping the mule driver children do their job. So, because you were the ones who put them in the stable at night. So that's it.